Wichita, Kansas. 9 private pilots refused to fly Vanessa Kirkland's jet this month. The reason? Fit on a single line of paper worth $187. Frank Salas pulled his headset off first. The engine behind him powered down, then the second, then silence spread across the tarmac like something had stopped breathing. Vanessa checked her watch, 6:50 in the morning. Her board meeting in Denver started at 9. "Start the plane," she said. Nobody moved. 30 feet away, Nathaniel Bishop folded a single sheet of paper and slid it into his jacket pocket. He didn't argue, he didn't raise his voice. He simply closed his toolbox and latched it, the way he did every morning, like nothing unusual was happening at all. "He hasn't signed the release," the ground crew supervisor said quietly. "Then make him sign it," Vanessa snapped. Frank looked at her, and for the first time in 11 years of flying her family's aircraft, he didn't look afraid of her. "Ma'am, with respect, nobody on this field is taking off without his signature. Not today." Vanessa stared at the mechanic in gray collarvols, a man she'd exchanged maybe 40 words with in 3 weeks. Just a mechanic, that's all she'd ever seen him as. But the pilots weren't looking at him that way. Neither was the ground crew, neither was Frank. Somebody muttered, "Does she even know who that guy actually is?" Nate didn't answer. He walked toward his truck, where a 9-year-old girl waited in the passenger seat with a backpack on her lap, watching her father the way she always did, like nothing in the world could shake him. If you enjoy stories about quiet people whose integrity changes everything around them, consider subscribing. We put real care into these. Vanessa had 11 minutes before she needed wheels up. 11 minutes, and the only man who could fix that was pulling out of the parking lot with his daughter in the passenger seat, radio low, like the last 10 minutes hadn't happened at all. Marcus Doyle appeared at her elbow, the way he always did when things went wrong, smoothing his tie, already building the explanation she'd repeat to the board. "Small operators inflate things when they smell money. He's making a point. Pay the invoice, get your signature, we move on." "I never got the chance to pay it. You told me to hold it." Doyle didn't answer that directly. He rarely did. Frank stood near the cockpit stairs, arms crossed, saying nothing, though his silence carried more weight than anything Doyle had offered all morning. He'd flown this company's aircraft for 11 years. He'd never once seen all the pilots on a field agree on anything without a single phone call between them. That wasn't coincidence. Men who flew for a living didn't refuse work over nothing. Vanessa turned back toward the empty stretch of tarmac where the mechanic's truck had been. Somewhere behind her, one of the ground crew murmured to another, low enough that she wasn't meant to hear it. "She has no idea who that guy actually is." Vanessa didn't ask what he meant. Not yet. She had a flight to reschedule, a board to call, and a name she was starting to realize she should have paid closer attention to 3 weeks ago.
Nate dropped Lily at school the way he did every morning, watching her disappear through the double doors before pulling back on the road toward the hangar. He'd worked at Cessna Aviation Field for 6 years, long enough that nobody asked questions about where he came from anymore, long enough that the questions had simply stopped mattering to anyone but him. He liked it that way. Coveralls, a toolbox organized the way his father taught him, a truck with 200,000 miles on it. Nothing about him invited a second look. Frank was waiting when he pulled in, coffee in hand, standing closer to Nate's truck than he needed to. "She's going to try to fire you," Frank said. "Or worse, she's going to try to make this go away quietly. Let her try. You know what this is going to cost you. Every other client on this field talks to Kirkland Dynamics people. If she decides you're difficult—" "I'm not difficult," Nate said, pulling his toolbox from the truck bed. "I'm accurate. There's a difference, and most people who've flown long enough know it." Frank studied him a moment, the way he had 3 weeks earlier, holding a training binder with a name on it he still hadn't mentioned to anyone else. "You could tell her who you are. It'd end this in about 10 seconds. I didn't leave that life to use it as a bargaining chip, Frank." Frank didn't push. He'd learned that much. Inside the hangar office, the phone was ringing. the regional charter dispatcher, asking if Wallace Hutt's cancellation out of Kansas City had anything to do with the Kirkland situation. Then a second call, a different pilot, same question, same careful tone of a man choosing his words around something he didn't want printed anywhere. Nate let the calls go to voicemail. He had an aircraft to inspect and a signature he still hadn't given yet. If you enjoy stories about quiet people whose integrity outlasts the people trying to bury it, consider subscribing. We spend real time building these, and we'd love to keep sharing them with you. By noon, 4 pilots had declined Kirkland Dynamics work. None of them had ever met Nathaniel Bishop. All of them, somehow, already knew his name.
By 1 o'clock, Vanessa had a spreadsheet open on her desk that she hadn't asked for. Her assistant had pulled it together quietly, a list of every charter cancellation that week, cross-referenced against pilot names and home bases: Kansas City, Tulsa, Springfield. None of these men worked for the same company. None of them had spoken to each other as far as anyone could tell. "Find out what they have in common," Vanessa said. Her assistant hesitated. "I think I already did." She turned the laptop around. A single line, buried in an old training bulletin, scanned into the regional pilot network's shared archive, the kind of document nobody read twice after passing their certification exam. A name printed at the bottom, small, unremarkable, the way names on technical documents usually were. N. Bishop. Vanessa stared at it longer than she meant to. "That's a common last name." "It's not the name," her assistant said. "It's the document. Chief Pilot Salas flagged it in an internal memo 18 months ago, and nobody followed up. I only found it because I searched his full name against every training material on file for this region." Vanessa closed the laptop slower than she'd opened it. Marcus Doyle appeared in her doorway before she could sit with the thought. "The Denver board wants an answer by 4. If we don't have wheels up by then, they're going to ask why." "Pay the invoice," Vanessa said. "The full amount today." Doyle's expression flickered, there and gone so fast she nearly missed it. "I already told you cash flow's tight this quarter with the merger." "Pay it, Marcus." He left without agreeing to anything directly, the way he always did when he intended to do something else entirely, and Vanessa didn't notice because her attention was already back on the screen, on a name she couldn't quite place yet but couldn't stop turning over either. 3 hours to Denver, still no signature, and somewhere underneath all of it, a question she hadn't let herself ask out loud yet. Who exactly had she been refusing to pay? Marcus Doyle didn't pay the invoice. He told his assistant to hold it another cycle, same as before, and logged a note in the system that read, "Pending vendor verification," a phrase vague enough to survive a casual glance and specific enough to stop anyone from asking twice. He'd used that phrase before. It had always worked. At the hangar, Nate finished torquing a landing gear bolt on a different aircraft entirely, the invoice still unpaid, the folded release still sitting in his jacket where it had been for 3 weeks now. He didn't check his phone for updates. Checking wouldn't change anything, and he had a job in front of him that needed doing right. Frank found him there a little after 2, holding a printout he'd requested from the regional dispatch office out of simple restlessness, the kind that comes from knowing something is wrong and not yet knowing how wrong it was. 7 pilots now, Frank said, not 4, 7 across 3 states, and dispatch is starting to ask questions I can't answer without saying more than I want to. Nate wiped his hands on a rag and said nothing. "You could end this in 1 phone call," Frank said. "You know it." "I know it." "Then why won't you?" Nate closed his toolbox. "Because the day I start using my name to win an argument is the day it stops meaning what I built it to mean. It has to hold up on its own, Frank, or it doesn't hold up at all." Frank didn't have an answer for that. He wasn't sure there was one that would have satisfied him. Back in her office, Vanessa stared at a second document her assistant had found, an old FAA advisory referencing a structural fatigue standard still in active use, the kind of standard every mechanic on that field had trained against without ever meeting the person who wrote it. The same 3 letters at the bottom, N. Bishop. She picked up her phone to call Doyle and ask him directly this time whether the invoice had actually been paid.
It rang twice before he answered, and something in his voice, too quick, too smooth, told her the answer before he said a single word.
"It's handled," Doyle said. "I sent it through this morning." "Which account?" A pause, half a second too long. "The usual maintenance line. Why?" "Because I'm looking at the ledger right now, Marcus, and it doesn't show a payment. It shows a hold, dated yesterday, entered under your login." Doyle didn't answer right away, and in the silence, Vanessa heard something she hadn't let herself hear in 11 years of trusting him. Hesitation. "There's context you're missing," he finally said. "Let me come up and explain it properly, not over the phone." "Explain it now." He didn't. He said he had a call waiting and would be up within the hour, and the line went dead before she could press further, and Vanessa sat there holding a phone that had just told her more through what it didn't say than anything Doyle had said out loud in years. She pulled the maintenance budget herself this time, without asking anyone to summarize it for her, scrolling through 2 years of entries she'd never once looked at directly, because Doyle had always looked at them for her. Numbers that balanced on the surface. Numbers that, when she started comparing quarter to quarter instead of trusting the totals, didn't balance at all. Her phone buzzed, her assistant texting from downstairs. 3 more cancellations this hour. Regional Charter Network is asking if we want to issue a statement. Vanessa didn't respond to that yet. She was looking at a single line item from 14 months earlier, a vendor payment routed through an account she didn't recognize, approved the same week a maintenance invoice from a different company had gone unusually quiet in the records. It was a pattern. She could see the shape of it now, faint but real, the way a bruise shows before you remember bumping into anything. Downstairs, Frank was walking into the building without an appointment, a folder under his arm he'd carried in his desk drawer for 18 months, telling himself for the last time that it wasn't his business to raise. It was time someone told her the truth, whether it was his place to or not. Frank asked for 15 minutes and got them, mostly because Vanessa's assistant didn't have the heart to turn away a man who'd flown 3 generations of Kirklands without a single incident. He set the folder on her desk without sitting down first. "I found this by accident about 18 months ago, going through old budget archives for a maintenance audit. I told myself it wasn't mine to raise. I don't believe that anymore." Vanessa opened it slowly. Line items, vendor accounts she didn't recognize, the same ones she'd just started noticing herself an hour ago. Approvals, all routed through the same signature, quarter after quarter, going back 2 years. Marcus Doyle. "It's small enough each time that nobody outside the department would flag it," Frank said, especially not someone who trusted the person writing the reports. "But there's an outside audit next month, tied to the merger. If Bishop's invoice got paid and logged the normal way, an honest number sitting next to 2 years of dishonest ones would have stood out." Vanessa didn't look up from the pages. That's why he held it. "I think so." She sat with that a long moment, watching a version of Marcus Doyle she'd trusted for 11 years quietly come apart in her hands. Her father's voice came back to her, the same warning he'd given her the day he handed her the company. "Keep Marcus close. He knows where everything lives." He had known. That was exactly the problem. "He's downstairs," she said. "Says he wants to explain." "I imagine he does." Vanessa closed the folder and stood, smoothing her blazer, the particular calm of a woman who'd stopped being surprised and started being precise instead. Somewhere across town, a mechanic she'd spent 3 weeks treating like a problem is still holding a signature that could ground her company's entire reputation, and she's starting to understand, with a kind of quiet dread, that he might be the only honest man left in this building. "Send him up," she said, "and Frank, thank you for not staying quiet." Doyle came in, still smoothing his tie, the same gesture he always used before an explanation he hadn't finished building yet. "Vanessa, I can walk you through every one of those entries. Then walk me through this one." She turned her laptop around, the screen already open to the line item from 14 months earlier. Vendor account, $41,000, approved the same week a maintenance invoice from an outside contractor went quiet in our records. Explain that one first. Doyle looked at the screen a beat too long. Reclassification, timing differences, it's more complicated than it looks on a summary page. My father used to say that exact phrase to people he was about to fire. He also told me to keep you close because you knew where everything lived. I understand that sentence a lot better this afternoon than I did this morning. Your father trusted me for 11 years. My father isn't running this company. I am, and I just spent 3 weeks treating an honest man like a con artist to protect someone who's been quietly robbing this company since before I had the title to stop him. Doyle didn't answer that. He didn't have an explanation built for that version of the conversation, and for the first time since she'd known him, Vanessa watched him run out of words entirely. There's an audit next month, tied to the merger. You knew that. That's why Bishop's invoice couldn't be paid the normal way, isn't it? An honest number next to 2 years of dishonest ones would have stood out. Silence answered her more clearly than anything he could have said. Clean out your office, she said. Security will walk you out. And Marcus, I'll be calling the auditors myself this time, not you. If you've ever watched someone finally see the truth they should have seen months ago, you know this feeling. If stories like this move you, consider subscribing. We're just getting to the part that matters most. Downstairs, her assistant was already on the phone with dispatch, asking whether Nathaniel Bishop could be reached before Denver became impossible to save.
Vanessa drove to the hangar herself. No assistant, no driver, in a car she rarely used because tonight she wanted to arrive without an entourage standing between her and whatever she was about to say. Nate was closing up for the evening when her headlights swept the tarmac, latching his toolbox the same unhurried way he had 3 weeks earlier, like her arrival changed nothing about how he finished his day. I paid the invoice myself an hour ago, full amount. I also fired Marcus Doyle this afternoon. Nate didn't look surprised, which somehow surprised her more than if he had. I figured something like that was coming. You knew about Doyle? I didn't know the details. I knew somebody wanted that invoice buried instead of paid, and that's not usually about $4,000. It's about what an honest number sitting next to the wrong ones would show. Vanessa studied him a moment, the same way she studied contracts before signing them, looking for the catch she'd learned to expect from everyone. She didn't find one. She never had, not once in 3 weeks of trying. Frank told me something else today, about a bulletin, about a name at the bottom of a training document half this industry studied without ever knowing who wrote it. Something shifted in Nate's expression, small, careful, a door closing rather than opening. Frank talks too much. Is it true? He picked up his toolbox instead of answering right away, and across the tarmac, at the edge of the hangar light, a small girl in a school jacket sat waiting on an overturned bucket, coloring book balanced on her knee, watching her father the way she always did. Vanessa looked at her, then back at Nate, and something in her chest shifted too, quietly, like a door she'd forgotten to bolt properly. "That's my daughter," Nate said, before she could ask. Vanessa didn't press the earlier question again. She got back in her car instead, and for the first time since this began, she didn't look angry driving away. She looked like a woman doing arithmetic she wasn't sure she liked the answer to yet.
Marcus Doyle's termination made 3 paragraphs in the local business section by Friday morning, and considerable more conversation in the hangar break room where mechanics who'd never met the man now had strong opinions about him anyway. Vanessa read the article twice, then closed the paper and called Frank into her office instead of texting him because some conversations deserved more than a screen. "I need you to tell me the rest of it," she said. "Not the part you already gave me, the part about Bishop." Frank sat down slowly,
the way a man sits when he's about to hand over something he's carried a long time. 14 years at Halloran Aerospace, chief structural engineer. He wrote the hydraulic failure bulletin every pilot in this state trained on, sat in rooms deciding what made an aircraft safe enough to sell to the public. Then his wife died, and he looked at the life that came with that title, and he walked away from it all. Why? Because he had a daughter who barely knew him some weeks, and a career that had never once kept her mother alive. He decided the trade wasn't worth it anymore, no matter what it cost him. Vanessa sat with that, feeling something she hadn't expected to feel toward a man she'd spent 3 weeks refusing to pay. Not surprise, exactly, something closer to shame. He could have told me any of this himself, the first day even. It would have ended everything in 10 seconds. That's not who he is, Frank said. He didn't want you paying him because of who he used to be. He wanted you paying him because the work was honest. Those are 2 different things to him, and I don't think he'll ever let you forget which one matters. Vanessa looked out the window toward the airfield, where a mechanic in gray coveralls was walking toward a truck with a 9-year-old girl waiting inside it. A man who once shaped an industry's safety standards and never once mentioned it to protect a mortgage payment. I judged him the day I met him, she said quietly, based on nothing but an invoice and a coverall. Most people do, Frank said. He's used to it. Doesn't mean it's right. Vanessa reached for her phone. There was a call she needed to make, and it wasn't to the board. Nate answered on the second ring, still in the hangar, wiping grease off a wrench he didn't need to be holding anymore that evening. "I'd like you to come to my office, not about the plane, about something else." He came after his shift, still in coveralls, because he didn't want to make an occasion out of it, and sat across from her in a room built to make people fidget, in a chair that had made grown executives lose their footing. "Frank told me what you used to do," Vanessa said. "I want to hear it from you, not from a binder somebody dug out of a filing cabinet." Nate turned his coffee cup slowly on the desk, the way a man does when he's deciding how much of the truth to hand over. 14 years at Halloran Aerospace. I wrote safety standards half this industry still trains on, sat in rooms with men who thought their opinions mattered more than the physics did. Then my wife died, and I looked at the life I'd built, meetings, travel, a daughter who barely knew me some weeks, and I understood I'd built a career instead of a family. I didn't want to keep doing that, no matter what it cost me to walk away. "So you became a mechanic?" "I became a father who happens to be good at fixing airplanes. The title never mattered to me the way people assume it should." Vanessa studied him, the particular silence between them oddly comfortable, nothing like the silences she usually sat through in this office. "I judged you the day I met you, decided what you were worth before I knew anything real, based on a coverall and an invoice. I don't like that I made that mistake with you." "You corrected it," Frank said. "Most people don't bother once they've decided. They just find a way to make the first impression true." "Does it bother you, what you gave up to end up in a hangar in Wichita?" "It used to. Then I watched my daughter learn to read, and I realized I'd have missed it if I'd stayed. That trade still feels right, even on the days the mortgage doesn't." Vanessa reached into her desk drawer and slid a folder across the table, an offer letter, unsigned, waiting.
Nate didn't sign the letter that evening. He took it home, set it on the kitchen table next to a mortgage notice he could finally close a drawer on for good, and thought about Lily, about stability, and whether taking the job meant becoming again the man who'd missed dinners in exchange for a title that hadn't kept his wife alive. He accepted 2 days later, at the hangar, with one condition. "I don't want this because you're sorry," he told Vanessa. "Sorry fades. I want it because you need someone in that building who won't tell you what you want to hear just to keep his job." "That's the only reason I'm offering it," she said, and meant it more than she expected to. Word moved through the industry the way it always did, quietly, pilot to pilot, until calling ahead to ask whether Nathaniel Bishop had personally signed off on an aircraft became shorthand for safety itself across 3 states. Board meetings at Kirkland Dynamics opened with safety reports now, before quarterly earnings, a change that cost nothing on paper and changed everything about how the mechanics on the ground felt about the woman upstairs. Marcus Doyle's case moved slowly through federal court, the way these things do. On a Friday evening that autumn, Lily ran across the tarmac chasing a kite that kept refusing to catch the wind, laughing anyway. Vanessa came to stand beside Nate, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "I used to think I had this whole life figured out," she said. "Then a mechanic wouldn't sign a piece of paper and none of it made sense the same way again. I used to think I'd said goodbye to a version of myself I didn't want back," Nate said. "Turns out I just needed the right reason to let him back in, on my own terms this time." Lily finally caught the kite, tumbling into the grass with it, triumphant. Neither adult moved to help her up right away. They just watched. If stories like this stay with you, ones about quiet people whose integrity finally gets seen, consider subscribing. We'd love to keep sharing them with you.